The early morning sun cast a golden hue over the runway as the massive C-17 Globemaster III stood poised for departure. Its 4 powerful engines hummed with restrained energy, ready to unleash their full might at the command of the crew. Inside the cockpit, Captain Sarah Mitchell adjusted her headset, her sharp blue eyes scanning the instrument panel with practiced precision. Beside her, First Lieutenant Emily Carter ran through the pre-flight checklist, her voice steady and calm despite the urgency of their mission. In the back, Loadmasters Tech Sergeant Jessica Ramirez and Staff Sergeant Maya Thompson secured the last of the cargo, their movements efficient and synchronized. This was no routine flight. The call had come in the dead of night, an emergency deployment to the Middle East. The details were sparse, but the urgency was undeniable. Captain Mitchell tightened her grip on the yoke, her mind racing through the variables. Weather, fuel, payload, potential threats, every detail had to be accounted for. She had flown dozens of missions, but this one felt different. The tension in the air was palpable, a silent understanding among the crew that whatever awaited them on the other side would test their skills to the limit. "Tower, this is Reach 247, requesting immediate clearance for takeoff," she said, her voice cutting through the static of the radio. "Reach 247, you are cleared for takeoff. Winds at 10 knots, runway 22L. Godspeed." Mitchell acknowledged the clearance and turned to her co-pilot. "Let's get this bird in the air." Carter nodded, her hands moving swiftly across the controls. The engines roared to life, the sheer force of their power vibrating through the aircraft. The C-17 began its roll, gathering speed with every second. The runway lights blurred into streaks as the massive plane hurtled forward, its nose lifting gracefully into the dawn sky. As the wheels left the ground, Mitchell felt the familiar surge of adrenaline. The weight of responsibility settled on her shoulders, not just for the mission, but for her crew. They were more than just colleagues, they were a family, bound by trust and shared purpose. She glanced at Carter, who offered a small, determined smile. No words were needed, they both knew what was at stake. In the cargo hold, Ramirez and Thompson monitored the equipment, ensuring everything remained secure during the climb. The sudden shift in altitude could destabilize even the most carefully loaded cargo, and the last thing they needed was a loose pallet mid-flight. Ramirez wiped a bead of sweat from her brow, her dark eyes flicking to the straps holding the supplies in place. "Everything's tight back here," she called over the intercom. "Copy that," Mitchell replied. "We're hitting cruising altitude in 5. Get comfortable, it's gonna be a long haul." The C-17 leveled off, its engines settling into a steady rhythm. Below, the sprawling base shrank into the distance, replaced by the endless expanse of ocean. The crew fell into a familiar routine, each member hyper-aware of their role. Mitchell kept her eyes on the navigation systems, her mind already calculating the fuel stops and potential turbulence ahead. Carter monitored the engine diagnostics, her fingers dancing across the screens as she cross-checked the data. Hours passed in relative silence, the only sounds the constant hum of the engines and the occasional crackle of the radio. Then, without warning, a warning light flashed on the console. Mitchell's heart skipped a beat. "Talk to me, Carter," she said, her voice tight. "Portside engine is running hot," Carter replied, her brow furrowing. "Could be a sensor glitch, but we can't risk it." Mitchell clenched her jaw. An engine failure over the ocean was not an option. "Let's throttle back and see if it stabilizes." Ramirez, Thompson, prep for possible contingency procedures. The crew sprang into action, their training overriding any hint of panic. Carter adjusted the engine output while Mitchell radioed the nearest air traffic control for guidance. The response was immediate, a diversion to a nearby Allied airfield for inspection. Mitchell exchanged a glance with Carter. It wasn't ideal, but it was their only safe choice. The detour cost them precious time, but the engine issue turned out to be minor, a faulty sensor, just as Carter had suspected. After a quick repair, they were back in the air, the tension in the cockpit easing slightly. Yet the delay weighed on Mitchell. Every minute counted, and they were now behind schedule. As they crossed into international airspace, the reality of their mission loomed larger. The Middle East was a tinderbox, and their cargo, critical medical supplies and communications equipment, was desperately needed. Mitchell's thoughts drifted to the people on the ground waiting for their arrival. Lives depended on this delivery. Failure wasn't an option. The final approach was the most nerve-wracking. The airfield was small, poorly lit, and surrounded by rugged terrain. Mitchell's hands were steady on the controls, her focus absolute. Carter called out altitude and speed readings, her voice calm but firm. The C-17 descended smoothly, its massive frame touching down with a gentle thud. The reverse thrusters engaged, slowing the aircraft as it rolled to a stop. For a moment, there was silence. Then, the crew erupted into relieved smiles. They had made it. Mitchell let out a long breath, her shoulders relaxing for the first time in hours. "Nice work, everyone," she said, her voice thick with pride. Outside, the desert heat hit them like a wall as they descended the ramp. A group of soldiers and aid workers rushed forward, their faces etched with gratitude. The cargo was unloaded swiftly, the supplies already on their way to those who needed them most. As the crew regrouped by the plane, Ramirez grinned. "Not bad for a day's work, huh?" Thompson laughed. "Speak for yourself. I could sleep for a week." Mitchell looked at her team, her chest swelling with admiration. They had faced every challenge head-on, without hesitation. "Get some rest," she said. "But be ready. Something tells me this is just the beginning." The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the tarmac. The C-17 stood silent and imposing, a testament to the skill and courage of its crew. Somewhere in the distance, the sounds of a bustling base carried on the wind. The mission was far from over, but for now, they had succeeded. And that was enough.